nominate a vice chair.
I'll make a motion to nominate Commissioner Wetter for vice chair.
I'll second that.
First and seconded for Commissioner Wetter. Any discussion?
You gotta ask for any more nominations 3 times on this one too?
Yep, 3 times.
Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Last time, any other nominations? No other nominations. Take a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner Wetter is the vice chair. Next is the secretary. Any motions for a secretary?
I'll make a motion to have Commissioner Houston as secretary on our very last year, because she does write so well.
Motion made for Commissioner Houston, seconded by Commissioner Vetch. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Last time, any other nominations? Hearing none, vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, setting of the meeting dates for 2022. Every second and fourth Monday, 1:30 to 2:30.
I'll make a motion to set the meetings as written.
Motion made by Commissioner Houston.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Dahlheiden. Any other discussion?
Board, just so you recall that for the last 2 or more years, we've been abiding with this twice a month, and then we often then cancel the second meeting if there's no business pending.
I think it's been at least 3 years, hasn't it, by now?
3 years.
Yeah.
It's been a while, but
You want to leave it that way then?
that way, Mr. Chair, so then we don't have to set a special meeting if there is some business that needs to come before the board for the, second time of the month. That's why we've just left it that way. Because we used to meet twice a month until we figured out we didn't have to.
It's kind of nice because I think it frees up all of your calendars when we're not meeting to make way for another meeting.
Correct. Yeah, things do come up.
All right. Take a vote on that. All those in favor of the meeting schedule, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, committee appointments. First, Central Minnesota Council on Aging, 3-year term. 2021 member is Commissioner Wetter. Is there a nomination for 2022?
Oh, it's just, this is really not nomination, it's just appointment. If nobody,
For 3 years.
people want
I
to
guess.
change or that sort of stuff.
Okay, so that's then, you got 2 years left of the term then, potentially
Yes.
for Commissioner
Yes, sir.
Wetter, right? He's on for a 3-year?
Yep.
Okay. So that one would be the same. Local Emergency Medical Systems Council, that's me, that's yearly appointment then?
It's up to you if you want to continue doing it. Some of them are, you're only allowed to be on so long, just like the library board.
Oh,
But
okay.
EMS, I was on it for 8 years, so.
Oh, well, I'll keep that unless someone else has a burning interest. Okay. That one, so catch mark will be the same for Local Emergency Medical Systems Council. Next, Interagency Early Intervention Committee, currently Commissioner Wetter.
I don't know that there ever was a meeting this last year, was there?
Okay, so you're interested in
Otherwise, I
keeping
missed
that?
it.
I don't think there's been a meeting for a while.
Okay,
So you're interested in keeping that,
Sure, I'll
Commissioner
keep
Wetter?
it.
Okay,
as long as it's 0 again.
No promises.
No, I know, I'm
next,
teasing.
Human Services Advisory Committee, Commissioner Houston currently serving.
Yep, I'm fine with that.
All right, that one remains the same. And Mental Health Advisory Council is Commissioner Dahlheiden.
Yeah, I'll take that one in the public health.
Okay.
For my last year. I just want to see the dental clinic finish up and stuff.
All right, so we got that settled, as well as Public Health Task Force will remain Commissioner Dahlheiden. Next, Emergency Management / Public Health, Emergency Preparedness, Workshop Advisory Council, previously the Emergency Preparedness Committee, currently as Commissioner Vetch.
And I'm fine. I think we've met once this last year.
Feverish pace and Commissioner Vetch will stay on there. Okay? Next, Truancy Task Force, currently Commissioner Vetch.
We haven't met as that group in years, I think, but it's always standing, but they've never had a meeting.
So you're good with that?
Yep.
Okay, Commissioner Vetch will stay on that. Next, State Community Health Services Advisory Committee appointment and alternate. Currently is Commissioner Hewsome and Rosenhusch and
Grotius.
Rosas,
Yeah.
and alternate.
I'm fine staying on.
So Sarah Grotius is the alternate to
Oh.
Commissioner Hewson.
Oh, my
Yep.
goodness.
All right, so Sarah, you're okay with that?
Yes, I appreciate being the alternate.
Okay.
I have to be there anyways. All the time, so.
All right, so that'll stay the same. Next, Community Adult Mental Health Initiative. Currently,
Yes, that's me and Jill as my alternate, and we can both remain on.
okay. Next, Central Minnesota Home Visiting Coalition. Currently Commissioner Daleiden.
Is this the first steps? Okay. Now, it says it's a 2-year term. And that was put on in 2019?
And then you were confirmed on January 10th, 2020.
Oh, okay,
To
so
a
then I'm,
2-year
all right,
term.
so then I got one more year then.
So this would be, no, I think this would be,
Yeah,
you would be
One
up
more
again
year.
right now. Right, Sarah?
good. Oh,
Because I'll only be around one more year.
The 4-year grant? I think this is the second.
That we're going into?
that's what it looks like here.
Okay,
Okay?
Commissioner
Yeah,
Daleiden.
yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
Great,
well,
thank
that
you.
should conclude the reorganization, right?
Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
Right. And, next with the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Minutes
Mr.
approved.
Chair, can we have an action, please, on the appointment committees?
Oh, sure. So
We have a
before we do
motion.
that, we have to rescind the motion, but just from procedural pieces.
Yeah, I'll rescind the motion for the minutes.
Okay, then do we have a
Chair, I'll
motion?
make a motion to approve the advisory committee assignments as stated.
I'll second it.
Motion made, Commissioner Vetch, seconded, Commissioner Daleiden. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Then we've got the meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
A motion made by Commissioner Daleiden, seconded by Commissioner Hewsome to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carries. Next, review and approval of the agenda. Anything anyone wants to add or change to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I'm not asking to change it, I'm just letting you know that on number 7, I'll introduce the person, they're not here, and we'll invite them back next month with the March Employee of the Month.
Employee of the month? Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Motion made by Commissioner Daleiden, seconded by Commissioner Wetter with
Sorry about
with
that.
the
I
one
thought-
adjustment on number 7 with the employee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda. Is there anyone wants to add or remove from the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to point out under item B, under the consent agenda, that the calendar that's presented there for that out-of-state travel is that January date because of the COVID virus resurgence is being rescheduled. I'm still going to ask that all 3 trainings be approved, but without the dates attached to them.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, can I get just a little more explanation about item A? The objective observer.
Yeah,
Sure, so there should be a item in your,
Yep.
objective observer procedure. It's under statute 260C, 203, that we have to have a neutral party attend our administrative reviews to monitor our service delivery for children and families. So this is a requirement that we have. In the past, we've been paying. It comes up fairly infrequently. I think the minutes say that last year we had just 3 instances. When we looked back, we hadn't changed the rate of pay for our objective observers for a number of years, more than a decade, I believe. So we're just asking that we bring this up to the same as what the board approved in, at the last board meeting for meetings, and that it potentially just follow the same board when those meeting stipends go, change, that would also impact this stipend. So we're not bringing it back all the time.
Mr. Chair. Jamie, can you remind us, I think, we put this in place, didn't we, as a board?
It would have been before my time.
Was it? Okay.
Yes. So
I think I'm confusing that with another thing that Commissioner Burrell brought
We did bring like the youth
up.
council, it's the only thing I can think of,
Okay.
which we haven't done anything with. I don't know if Michelle Miller is here, she can maybe explain more about this, but we are concerned that we would not have somebody that would take the $30 in order to do this requirement. That kind of makes us accountable for how we're working with families and kids.
Well, and up on as a list, so it is not connected with the agency, so not a staff, but community would be kind of that person to pressure the out-of-home placement services is the plan, reasonable and good from a. Typically, these folks are people who are retired from the agency, so are at least somewhat familiar with the work that we do. And this is one of those things that truly, in the 10 years I've been the manager, we've never changed. And it has got lost. And so if we can connect it with what the committees get paid, then this, I feel like their time is valuable, and they travel to come to the and meet with our staff and the just trying to, I guess, have it not be forgotten in this important work. Jamie's right, it doesn't happen all that often, thankfully.
It doesn't impact our
It
budget,
does,
so
yeah.
it's impacts it very, very slightly.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made to approve the consent agenda by Commissioner Daleiden and seconded by Commissioner Wetter. Any further discussion?
Board, could I just also point out under letter E that we are looking at doing a staff training day. I did speak with building facility or maintenance, Alan, we'll check, and he thought that this would not pose a problem to meet in the new government center on March 1st, whether or not we have occupancy at that point.
What day is that?
March 1st, I think, is either a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday?
So we won't be having a board meeting in there then?
That was the other question. I think we could potentially just use those other rooms at the beginning of the time if you were. But if you weren't having a board meeting there, it would sure make it easier.
Any other discussion? Otherwise, we also have the change of removing the dates from, but approving those conferences. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Okay, motion carries. And next is the regular agenda.
Nope, we have our new hires. Oh, this is part of a regular agenda, I guess.
No, it's under,
It's,
it's
What's
under
under?
the consent agenda.
Okay.
I'm not sure why it is that way, but
Yeah, that's true. Could I
It is?
introduce
All
our
right.
new hires to the
I
board?
guess it
Go
is.
ahead.
Board, I'd like to introduce to you Andrea Buffy. She's our OT1 and our office support team. She started over Friday. So, jumped in. We've kind of been struggling with some of our office support, just having enough people here to run a very, very busy area. So Andrea's been doing a great job getting her feet wet really, really fast. So, Andrea, on to their questions.
Yes.
Are you from the area, Andrea?
Yes.
Wright County?
Buffalo.
That's where you live now?
Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome to Wright County.
And for working at the Wright County.
That's right.
You guys, someone's gonna have to catch up from, or take over for me, guys.
With our own line of questioning. Or not.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right.
We're very happy to have you with us.
Yes.
Health and Human Services.
We are.
We also have with us Amber Deer. Actually, she's going to, if you could turn your camera on, Amber, I'd introduce you to the board. This is Amber Doring. She's our new public health nurse in our health, I think we have a misspelling there, our Healthy Children and Family Services team. Started on December 20th. So welcome to you, Amber, and she reports to Kelsey, and we're very happy to have you with us. And if you could please answer the board's question as well.
Hello, Amber. Are you from Wright County?
Yes, born and raised in Clearwater.
All right.
I didn't hear what she said.
Clearwater.
Oh, Clearwater, okay.
Well, good to see you in person instead of just a circle. Otherwise, it's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain talking to us. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yes, nice
Welcome.
to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. Board, I'd also like you to meet Bridget Audette. She's our new social worker in our Child Protection 1 team. She started on December 27th.
Hello, Bridget.
Christmas.
Now, she doesn't live in the Wright County.
Really?
No, I do not.
And I was looking at, you know, they have a little information about them online, which is why I wasn't asking a lot of questions, because I looked at them ahead of time, and I knew there was a couple that just don't know where to be right.
Now she does work for the.
Well, I know she works for the Wright County, we just gotta get her moved to the Wright County.
Working on it.
Thank you.
Where do you live now, Bridget?
Maple Grove.
Okay, not too far. Yeah, welcome.
Welcome, Bridget. We also finally have Marcy Jasper. She's a social worker with our intake and intervention team. She started just on January 5th, so.
Oh, newbie.
Hello, Marcy. Anything you'd like to share with us without us trying to solicit anything from you?
Sorry, I live in Elk River, Strong County, for a couple more years until my kids
Did we steal you from
No, I was with the state, actually,
pardon?
the state of Minnesota.
Okay.
We won't hold that against her, though.
Even better, we stole
What
you from the
area did you
state.
work for in the state?
Deed, services,
Okay, nice. Well,
Thank you.
welcome.
Welcome, Marcy. Welcome to all of our new staff.
Happy to have them.
Absolutely.
Employee of the month.
Yeah, so board, I'd like to let you know, so we can just move ahead with it, that Beth Hammer, a social worker in our assessment unit, is our employee of the month. We surprised her with this late last week, and she had a vacation day today, so she's not here with us today. She is aware of the recognition, and we will present her next month when we bring our March employee of the month to meet you.
Okay.
So for all you new employees, this is something that you can strive for.
It's the gold
Because
standard.
it's I tell you, it just lifts you up really high. There's, what is it, a
No pay
$10,000 bonus or something?
Oh, next, regular agenda, letter A, social services / public health / financial services. Number 1's approve resolution, Health and Human Services 22-01.
I'll make a motion to approve the donations.
Motion made by Commissioner
Second
Deline,
that.
seconded by Commissioner Hewson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Roll call vote.
Roll call vote.
Resolution.
Okay. Commissioner Deline?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes, resolution passes.
Yeah, thank you for the donation.
Number 2, informational item, setting up and collecting out-of-home placement fees.
Yes, thank you, Board. We are here to provide information. Actually, I think you have most of the information in your packet. We've included the Wright County Health and Human Services policy and procedures out-of-home placement fees that we updated October of 2020. You have a handout regarding an email that went out to staff in March of 2020 about our change in processes, and that's this one page. I just wanted to review with you, especially with the 2 commissioners that were not here when we passed this, that our goal in our out-of-home placement fee changes was to remove barriers for families in very difficult situations, to establish reasonable debts that are affordable for each family situation, to to be able to clearly explain why and how we calculate the fees for out-of-home placement, eliminate the use of the child support calculator, just in out-of-home placements, we still use it for determining child support, gather less information when possible from the families, and to streamline our HHS process. And then you'll see that we made some of the changes. I believe when I was reading through our board minutes from April 27th of that year, I believe it was Commissioner Vetch who brought up a concern about charging for emergency foster care under a protective hold, the 72-hour hold, so we eliminated that process. We started billing quarterly instead of monthly. We just kind of started we relooked at our out-of-home placement charges to see how it impacts the families and how we could work better with them to gain cooperation and to ultimately have kids reunite with their families sooner without throwing up any barriers. So this is something that we did in 2020. The bulletin that talks about, we currently use a state fee scale, so if you were interested, you could kind of page toward the back of the bulletin that you have, bulletin number 216806, and it'll show you the fee that would accrue to the different size families based on their income levels, and you'll see that it's, I would say, a much lower level, lower threshold of getting obligations from families based on the state fee schedule. So we've been using that for almost 2 years now. As a result of that, there was recently National Public Radio had an article about out-of-home collection fees, and Wright County was brought up in it, but you'll see in the article that it did say that Wright County collected, actually it said charged $101,000, I believe, in 2018, and only charged $50,000 in 2020. Actually, the information that was provided to NPRs is that's what we collected in each of those years, but based on the lower charging amounts, our collections obviously are down as well, since we don't have as big of a base to collect from. Also, you'll see in your packet, there's one more thing. I think we also included those, the board minutes from April 27th. So just coming back to let the board know that we indeed did make these changes to our practices and policies, and that they've been in the works now for a couple of years. Obligations that existed prior to the change in these practices, we're certainly willing to work with families that come forward and ask for help with their obligation. I have Christine and Kate here who both work in that area, and I see one of our collection officers is here as well if you have any questions. Tina Klopaki is our collection officer.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Dodd.
How many people do we have out there now that owe us money?
All right. Do you mean just for out-of-home placement or across the board?
Well, no, for the subject we're having regarding NPR.
So fees assessed to clients, so in 2021, we assessed 35 debts, compared to in 2017, we had 106. So to put that in perspective, every year it's gone down. 2018, we assessed 80, 2019, 54, and 2020, 44. So we're definitely assessing less per year.
Okay, now the ones from in 2017, where there was quite a few, for those that have paid some but haven't paid so we know they're trying to do something. Can we do something to eliminate their debt, or
Yep.
you know, how can we help them to continue to be successful?
So 73 of those in 2017 have a zero balance now. So we do have a large amount. Tina, can you see anything else other than helping them through?
Right, and I would say oftentimes when we are working with families, if there are things we can negotiate on, we discuss things with the families, we bring it to our supervisors for decisions. But yes, we do try to work with our families.
Because I was just thinking, for those that have been paying on a regular basis, to just, after we get to a certain point, just swipe it out so that they can move on with their lives.
Right.
We do have a write-off policy in place too that we use.
And we bring that to the board oftentimes. One other item, board, that I think is worth noting is prior to bringing this to the board back a couple years ago, we were setting obligations off of 100% of what the county was experiencing, like paying for foster care for the children that were placed. And that's really pretty unobtainable, especially if they're not cooperating with us, and we would set this very high debt. Now we set the threshold at 50% of what the county pays out, and we go from there. So that was part of the change back in 2020.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Vetch.
so I have a few questions. I want to make sure I'm reading it all right and understanding it first of all. So a family of 4, if they're making $80,000 a year, would pay their fee payment would be $68 a month. Based on that chart, is that? And so if that's the case, and let's say their out-of-home placement was for 6 months, the average amount was got to be north of about $10,000 or more for 2 children out-of-home placement for 6 months. Probably north of that, but at 50%. With us charging back 50%, it's got to be right around $10,000, $12,000. I mean, at $68 a month, we're going to be having on our books for like a lifetime.
No, they're charged $68 for each month the kids are in care. So
Oh,
their
okay, that's
total-
okay. That's what I was trying to understand. So they get charged. Okay, so each month that they're in care.
For each child.
For each
right.
child they're in care, so that 6 months would be $68 times the 6 months. That's what
Right.
they're charged for the entire time they're out.
Correct.
Okay.
The 50% is only if the parents do not provide their income. It's going to charge them 50% of the actual cost of care.
Well, would that be insane
until
because
they cooperate and provide the income, and then we'll apply the fee schedule.
the 50% of the cost would be, even if you were making $150,000 a year, it'd still be cheaper to you to give us your income.
Absolutely.
That's the goal.
Looking at this chart, because 50% of the cost is going to be like $1,500 a month or more on 2 kids, and that's just depending on what they're rated at from the care level that they need. Okay, so now I'm trying to understand why some people have these, I hate to say egregious balances, but it's because they're not doing what they need to be able to follow the fee schedule.
And I would characterize this too, maybe it's just, doesn't make a hill of beans, but we are obligated to determine an obligation, but that obligation can be 0. So, we're looking at every family to determine obligation, but because of the state fee scale is the way it is, many of those obligations are 0 now.
Well, I think, what we're asking, none of these are, exuberant amounts of money.
Not at all.
It's just a matter of showing that you either do or do not have income. And obviously, if they're being reunited, they have some sort of income. And unless they're making $1 million a year, which then the payment wouldn't be a problem anyways.
Right.
Well, then they had better attorneys, so it wouldn't have ever been an issue.
I don't know if an attorney could even help you with some of these. But like Commissioner Vetch said, I believe it's fairly reasonable and doable for our families.
Thank you for walking me through it. I just want to make sure because I wasn't comprehending it right, so.
So that was just to bring you up to date on where we're at after a couple, not quite a couple of years, but after looking at this and again in light of the recent articles. So, I feel like we are being pretty responsible, both toward the taxpayers and toward the families we serve.
Okay, thank you. Next item is Right to School Program, Jessica Nelson.
Thank you. Jessica is our intervention and intake supervisor, and she has a PowerPoint for you to see. This was also an item that we were at board about 6 months ago, I believe, and we're bringing some of the changes to our truancy, and you said, why don't you come back after the school year is kind of been through a few months to see how it's faring. So in looking at some of the information, we still feel like it's a little bit early in the process to give it a fair evaluation, but the school year is about half over, so here we are. Board, I think you should have the handout in your packet.
I didn't see that handout, but,
You have to highlight it.
oh, I got this. Forget about those highlighting things.
You want me to call somebody from IT?
We just think anticipation makes it that
Yes.
much more
Oh, okay.
sweeter when you see it.
Just talk amongst yourselves until then.
All right, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so we just wanted to provide you with some information about kind of our truancy program. We've adapted it to hopefully strengthen families. We have our mission statement, or purpose statement, which is to strengthen, support, and serve students, their families, and schools to achieve regular and consistent school attendance. And that's our ultimate goal, is to make sure kids are attending school consistently. A lot of people have wondered kind of why we're making these changes. Well, even though COVID's not over, we've learned a lot about the needs of students and their families, and what they've learned and how things have kind of changed the way that they look at things, and how kids are changing, just adapting and changing from being at home with distance learning and now coming back into school, and how their needs have changed and how they're needing more time and attention in the school building and at home, and needing at home, and how their attendance has kind of drifted a little bit, and so wanting to make sure that we're supporting families. We're still keeping the good stuff and what has been working all this time, and adding more good stuff. We want to provide the best service possible that we can for families and schools, and we're continuing to increase our collaboration with the schools and families and the community. So our process, I'll just go through it really quickly. You know, we've always had kind of a 3-day letter that the schools are required to send out to families by law, and so that is going to continue. So when there's 3 unexcused absences, the schools will continue to send that. We're adding a student support plan, which is a more formalized plan that the schools are creating with the families. Schools have always been doing interventions with families since we can remember when we've been working with them, and we have 10 school districts that we work with in Wright County. A lot of other counties have like 1 or 2 school districts, like the Minneapolis School District is in Hennepin County, so it's 1 school district that they work with. In Carver County, they have 2, Waconia and the Eastern Carver County School District, and we have 10 in Wright County that we work with, and so we wanted a document that was more universal, that was used to have all of this information documented on that they're doing before we get the referral. And so we created, or actually we copied it from Scott County, a student support plan, so that we could have this information sharing document, so we have a mechanism that was more universal across the whole county instead of 10 different ways of sharing information. And then we created the attendance intervention meeting, which we had the truancy mediation meeting, which was serving our truancy families and the youth. And now we're going to be applying that also to our ed neglect families. They were sending in a letter out with the ed neglect families, and they weren't attending the meeting. And so now we're having the ed neglect families also attend a separate meeting, but they're going to be back to back.
Could you quickly explain the difference between truancy and ed neglect?
Yep, ed neglect families are 12 and under. And truancy is over 12. And so there are some different laws and requirements with those who are over 12. And 12 and under, they assume it's the parent's responsibility to get the kids to school, whereas when you're over 12, it's your own responsibility at that point to make sure you're getting to school. Although in some rare instances, it is the parent that we're going after for ed neglect. So if a kid is 16, Sometimes we will mark it as an educational neglect case, but those are rare instances. So we're receiving the initial referral after 5 unexcused absences, and then we expect the school will be working on the student support plan. After 15 days, and if there are continued absences, the school can submit an intervention referral along with the student support plan, and then we will assign a social worker to work with the family and reach out. We've decided that 5 days, within 5 days, they need to be meeting with the family and creating a plan on how they're going to improve the attendance. And within 5 days of that meeting, we're going to have the SARD meeting, which is a meeting that we've been having for a long time, and that involves the school as well. So we're adding a step in there where we're meeting with the family before we meet with the school and the county and the family. This way we feel like we can really collaborate with the family, find out what resources they have, what supports they have, how we can get them what they need, what's going on with the family system, why the student feels that there's a barrier for them attending school. We're finding out that there, might be a loss in the family. Kids are revealing, some significant traumas that they have experienced. They're talking about challenges that they're having at school, challenges that they're having at home. So we're really getting stuff that kids are talking about, they're dealing with at home, that sometimes they're not willing to talk about at the school meeting. So, and then we're bringing this 5 days later to the school meeting or the SARD meeting. That's really helping us kind of bridge that gap and have to determine how can we have the school also be supportive and what supports we can bring forward with the school meeting. At that point, we've asked, to have that SARD meeting, allow please 20 school days. Now this isn't unexcused absences, this is 20 school days for that intervention to work. If at that point we're collaborating with the school, if there hasn't been an improvement in attendance, we'll file a court petition. But if there has, let's let the student, continue to move forward, work with the school, and we're monitoring that. There's a social worker assigned. We're monitoring the attendance collaboratively with the school, working with the student. A lot of these kids we're noticing, they kind of go up and down. They'll have a couple of days where they'll be doing really good, or a couple weeks even, and then they'll have a couple days where they'll have absences, and then they'll have a couple really good days, and then they'll have a couple days where they're not so good. So we're working collaboratively with the schools to have those ongoing discussions and kind of decide, is this going to be a good day? Is this not going to be a good, do we file, do we not file? What's going on right now that they're having these bad days? Going on that they're having some really good days. So we're having those ongoing discussions, and the ones that we're talking about seem to be going really well. There are some additional options. We do have some fast track options as well. There is something called a 15-day drop. So if a child has 15 consecutive unexcused absence, the schools are required by law to drop those students from their enrollment. And in order to hopefully curb that from happening, we do have the option that we can file right away. And so we've asked the schools at that point to submit a referral, an intervention referral right away to us at 10 consecutive unexcused absences, and we'll get moving on that right away. Or they could also file a fast track referral with the county attorney's office, which goes directly to a petition being filed. So those are our fast track options as well. So what does it look like? Our intervention and our family support. We focus on making sure the student's able to improve their attendance. We create a family support plan. We work with the student and the family to identify what barriers exist. How are we going to break down those barriers? We ask the family what other supports they have so we can build those in. If there are community resources needed, if the student identifies they need therapy or other community resources, we make sure to get them connected to those. If there's an alternative setting that is needed for the student, we've had a couple students identify that, the school feels too big. They feel that they can't attend that particular school because they have so much anxiety because the school is too big or they feel uncomfortable for other reasons in that school setting, then we have helped them identify alternative settings and gotten them to those buildings, and they have done much better. So we really work with the school, the student, and the family to create a plan that's going to help them be successful. And this is kind of our map. We call it an assessment map to work with the family. Kind of, there's some questions here. I know it's hard for you guys to read from there, but it's just some guiding questions on how we work with the family. So what are you as a parent worried about? What are you as a student worried about in moving forward? How this is going to affect your future? And how can we help you? What does safety, or what does it look like for you to be doing well? What does a good day look like when you are doing well? And what else is going on? What are some of your family resources already that we can identify? And what's your best hopes for the future in school? You know, is it your hope to graduate? Is it not your hope to graduate? Well, we have met with students, and it is their best hope to get a GED. And so if the school is pushing for graduation and the student has a total different dream and we're pushing for something else, we're off track. And so we want to know what their ultimate goal is. So we're aiming for the same thing. Some general statistics on truancy cases. We have, so for truancy, this is over a 10-year time span, and for ed neglect, it's over a 7-year time span, because we've only been doing our ed neglect early intervention for the last 7 years. So we've had a 60% success rate of improved attendance upon our initial referral. So when we receive that initial referral, and we have our truancy mediation meeting, or for the ed neglect cases, it was just a letter that was being sent out to families up until this year. So we have a 60% success rate that the case would not move on to the next level, which was the SARB meeting. In ed neglect cases, it was a 64% success rate that they would not move on then to the SARB meeting level. Attendance at the AIM meeting, or the truancy mediation meeting, truly is critical, you know, in making sure that students are successful in attending school. And we believe it is critical for that reason. And then an average of 85% of truancy students that have moved forward to the next level, so the SARB meeting, would not have a CHIPS petition filed. So those 40% that did move on to the next level, 85% of those did not have a CHIPS petition filed because they had the supports necessary put in place. And on ed neglect cases, the 36% of those that moved on to the SARB level, 94% of them did not have a child protection report filed. So for ed neglect cases, they don't have a CHIPS petition filed. As their next step, they would have a child protection report filed as a next step. And so 94% of those cases did not move on to a child protection report, which those numbers are fantastic, in my opinion. And this is just our team. So Marcy, obviously, she started last week as our ed neglect social worker. And then we have Jessica Summers, who's our truancy case aide, Paige Brash, who's a truancy social worker, and Nathan Sint, who's a truancy social worker, and myself. And then we have Wright to School, which is our newly created name this year, and then myself. That's it.
Jessica, thanks for your presentation. And the last year, I've been to a lot of safe school meetings. And at every one, the thing that always comes up is truancy. Truancy is out of hand, it's out of control, pretty much from one end to the other of the ones I went to. Can you tell us how many of last year or this year that you referred to the county attorney's office for their role in dealing with truancy?
How many we've referred?
Right.
We haven't referred that many. We have 2 right now that we're going to be referring. Last year we didn't refer any. It was kind of a COVID situation last year, where, I mean, MDE and DHS was recommending that, that petitions weren't not to be filed for truancy and ed neglect last year. And we were working with families to do a lot of intervention. Last year was, I would say, a really unique year where we received more referrals than we had ever received before. So we were doing a lot of phone calls and early intervention with families. So we didn't have any referrals to the county attorney's office, but there were a lot of unique circumstances as well. So it's hard to measure that against previous years.
So from this year, this school year though, you've got 2 you're thinking about referring, but
Yeah, and there have been a lot of other, I don't have specific numbers, but there have been a lot of additional direct referrals to the county attorney's office. So there's a new option where schools have made some direct referrals to the county attorney.
now one of the meetings I went to, it sounded like the school staff was saying there was a lot of hoops to jump through with this process. Do you have any feedback for the board from school districts across the county on this process?
So we've had some schools contact us that have felt that way, and once we have sat down and met with them and gone through the process and answered some of their questions, that they felt a lot better about it and more comfortable about it. And so I think it's just a lack of knowing the process and working through the process, because it really isn't any more than what had been done before. I think there's some name changes, and so we've changed the name to initial and intervention versus 3-day and 5-day. And so I think just changing the names because it's more universal, because it's truancy and ed neglect instead of them being separated out from previous years. And so making it more universal, so we're doing the same for both truancy and ed neglect. And then adding the student support plan. And as I've talked to different schools, I even talked to a school administrator today, as we talk them through it, they're feeling more comfortable. So I think it's just getting used to things, getting used to change. Change is hard sometimes.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Vetch?
So, and I guess it would have been nice for the presentation to show our numbers of cases that we've, the referrals that we've had, because the numbers should be quite substantially larger over the last 3 years based on what I'm hearing, but those would have been good numbers to have. The other question is, and I'm trying to wrap my head around this, is truancy kind of falls into 3 buckets. Either it's behavioral, it's emotional, or it's lack of resources. This process works really great for lack of resources and emotional, but the behavioral students, this gives them a very long leash, and basically they exploit it out even further till they end up, I shouldn't even say that they exploit it out, they actually know how to manipulate it out to get them to play out a situation what ends up getting them to the end of a school year only to begin the process over again. And it's kind of a perpetuating cycle for these individuals. What ends up happening then is that they have fallen so far behind in their education that going to school for them is futile because they can't graduate. Their only option at this point is, because by law they have to be there till they're 18, but they can't get a diploma because they don't have enough time to get enough credits. Their only option is a GED. But we don't facilitate it in that manner because we have to change it at some point. We have to change the way, their educational pathway at that point, because you're already 16 and you've missed too much school. Getting the diploma isn't going to happen for you. So we need to curve that path differently for you. But there's so many things that are going on with that we're just, the law says we got to be here till you're 18. And we're going to keep you there till 18. They'll graduate with no GED and they'll graduate with no diploma, but we kept them there till they're 18.
No,
16?
I thought that they get quit at 16, drop out.
It's actually 17.
Or 17.
Parents
There's
signing them out.
there is a date in there, but yeah.
But there is alternatives. I mean, St. Michael has the Knights Academy. There's over at the Wright County,
Area learning.
The Phoenix Learning Center.
Phoenix, is that part of the Wright County,
And they have Wright Tech.
Wright Tech, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, Wright
Because
Tech.
Wright Tech also has has a class for those that don't do well at regular schools, because one of my employees went there.
Mr.
The
Chair.
reality is, we don't get any referrals for the kids that are just behavioral. 99.9%
But
of
they're
our
not going to
kids.
the county's attorney's office, so then where are they going?
Well, that's not true. I mean, when you're talking to, when the sheriff was here this morning earlier, they were talking about the amount of cases, issues
But I
they've
mean,
been
those kids
having.
end up in the juvenile justice system.
They've been up
Those aren't the kids we're
dramatically.
getting the
I guess,
referrals.
and I guess I would have been interested to know from the county attorney's office, because from from what I've heard, they haven't had that very many cases, so if they're not going to you and they're not going to them, but clearly what it sounds like out there is a lot of them are behavioral and not.
Last year we came and we gave you the numbers for last year. They were like 1,500, it was like some crazy. 1,300. So we presented that last year, we didn't bring that back this year. I think, and you've talked with the county attorney's office, and I've been at those safe school meetings too, you know. And I think we were trying to offer schools a choice. I think we can't really underestimate those 10 school districts. And think about half of those school districts are also working with another county, you know, so they bridge over with Meeker or with Hennepin or with Stearns County. So they're also having to work with other counties, not just us. So I think we do try to cobble things together a little bit to be what we need for those families, you know, during kind of I think it's been more of a crisis time than before. I think we were seeing behavioral, and now it seems like it's more like family crisis intervention.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, it's not that the kids aren't identifying as behavioral issues to the school initially when we received the referral, but as we dig in, that's like the tip of the iceberg. And as we dig in, we find out that this child has been a victim of major sexual assault 3 years ago, and that's what they're continuing to deal with emotionally. And they have all this other stuff that is going on, and that's why they are having attendance issues. So these kids, all of these kids have this additional trauma that they're dealing with, and that's why they're having attendance issues, how it's displayed. We have every single kid on the truancy caseload has a significant trauma that they're dealing with. And so it's not that, and it comes out as behavior, significant behavioral issues at school or at home or in the community, but the underlying issue is always some form of trauma, whether their parent died earlier this year or they're suffering some kind of other loss, or a parent has loss of a job, or the student is working because the parent can't afford to put food on the table. I mean, there's always some other underlying issue, and it's not a strictly behavioral kid because they just don't want to go to school.
Mr. Chair, follow-up. So, and I think the program is good, especially for a first time through. Now, you went through this school year, we went the program. Now, if you come back next year, are we going to hold their hand through this whole
We
process?
changed that up a little bit.
Because if you're a multi-year person, I mean, at what point are you just plain old an habitual truancy offender?
I guess it depends on how you look at it.
But we talked about talking with the schools, if we're not starting from scratch every school year, that if we're talking with the schools and they're saying, this is habitual and this was going on last year, then we would potentially be looking at this differently. Like we were halfway through the process last year, school year ended, we're back at the beginning now. That doesn't mean we're necessarily going to start at the very beginning of this process, because we'd be looking at what their past history was.
Right, usually they don't attend the AIM meeting again, which is the, educational.
But you're right, some folks are going to,
They're crafty. They're good. They're good at making the story sound way more traumatic or whatever it is to make it. I know.
What we
kids in
would like to do,
situations.
because this is a new effort, and I like to call things a pilot, is to take a look at the end of the school year and work with the county attorney to say, does it make sense to continue to run two truancy programs? Does it make sense to go, what direction actually makes the most sense for our county and for our kids? I do think it makes it a lot difficult in Wright County just because of our school district situation. Came out with COVID too, our public health department's trying to deal with all these different schools and different school districts, MDE and DHS, and trying to corral people, and that corralling doesn't always work, or doesn't work for us. Maybe it's working for them, so.
Commissioner Houston, you had something?
Oh, I was just going to say that Phoenix School has moved to the Buffalo High School. So they were in a separate campus, but they moved because it made gave the students at Phoenix more opportunity, you know, to have more resources that the high school had that they didn't have, so. But it's kind of an alternative program.
And we're talking about potentially two different programs handling truancy, the county attorney's office and then Health and Human Services to some degree. I don't know how many overlap, or their procedure, I think, is 10 absent days, and then they get referred to them just on their own system. But what I see is there's several different county offices or departments that deal with truancy. You have Health and Human Services, the county attorney's office, SROs through the sheriff's office, and court services. And I think it might be a time, better sooner than later, to get everybody together instead of speaking on our own and then not knowing what the other side, and the school districts. I'd like to hear some direct feedback on how they think both processes are going, because apparently they have to do a lot of the lift and checking boxes
And I
and
go to
figuring
all
out
the
what
school district
direction
meetings, and I
it
think
needs to
there's,
go.
I think there's really like two camps. Some really like this process, and like, I would say maybe two really like the county attorney's process. So yeah, I think we do have to marry them a little bit together or something else, but I think there is a different flavor based on which safe school meetings you go to.
Well, I'd like to see a group, committee of the whole, however we need to get it together and talk about it. Because you got separate projects and initiatives, but at some point, if you had one form that everybody checks the boxes, but to hear a school year and a half and nobody getting referred, I maybe think that there's something lacking in the referral area from this process. But
And I would agree, I do agree with you. I think though those, when you look at those statistics, so like in the middle of the presentation, if you could divert 60% of the kids without having to go to court, that's 60% of the kids that never had to meet with a judge or a county attorney because they got diverted early on. You know, so that's a lot of county resources that are not being pulled into it because that diversion happened. If you just go from, and I think it all depends on what kid you're talking about and what the situation is, but for a lot of them, if you just go from, this is the first time this family's really had an interaction, and this is like the kid's kind of going down the wrong thing, and then they meet with us, if 60% of those don't have to go anywhere, and it's the meeting, and, you know, school's your best option here, and then maybe we see them down the road versus having them all be diverted to a more legal, you know, a legal case, that takes a lot of resources. And then my concern as the Health and Human Services Director is that doesn't leave out children's mental health. You know, so then we could have all these kids working in other departments, but it still bleeds over to the children's mental health area where these other, you know, as these other things come out. So, but I agree. I think it needs a better looking at. I was surprised at the low level of referrals last year, but again, I do think I agree with Jessica that the referrals, there wasn't a lot of meat to them when nobody was really in school, and the kids were having a hard time dealing with that. And we had 500-fold more referrals than we've ever had with the same number of staff. So what do you do?
Yeah,
We try to do something better that's going to meet the needs of more people.
and right now, I mean, we have referrals. I mean, each of my truancy workers has 30 cases on their caseload that they're meeting with families and connecting with them regularly and monitoring these students, whereas, I mean, those are high numbers, and so it's not like they're not working with families. These kids are just going to school and their plans are working. So in the intervention process is working. It's not like, I mean, it's just like the diversion process on court services. The diversionary process is working as it should be. So not that, and we are saving on county resources because we're not tying up a judge, we're not tying up a county attorney. It's doing its job.
Well, Michelle.
So just some clarification there, even though the school can make a fast track referral to the attorney's office or proceed, there are two tracks, we're working together, just because Rachel, who's the new county, proceed. But there's two tracks, but we're working together. Now, I don't know what probation does for their kids and SROs.
No, but sometimes we utilize them
They would
to go
inform
train
the
kids or
process.
go out together with them. And
Right. So it probably would be good for us to connect with court services, their kids, you know, sometimes don't. But, so I want to just be clear that there's two referral options, but it's the
once the referral goes to the county attorney's office and the petition's filed, the Wright County social worker is the one that attends court. So it gets referred over to us once the petition is filed. And in all reality, the family doesn't actually get to meet with the social worker until the court hearing happens. So it's considered a fast track because the petition goes to court faster, but them actually accessing services and getting connected to a social worker takes longer than when they make an intervention referral to social services.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
You know,
Commissioner Lloyd.
you talked about kind of having a committee of the whole or a meeting or something, and I'm not sure where that needs to go, but, you know, Commissioner Vet sounded like he had some personal experience from, you know, utilizing the system back when he was in high school. It sounded he had some unique knowledge of it. So maybe if you do have it, he'd be one person that you'd want to have involved in the meeting.
Yeah, and honestly, I think we'd welcome something if we could push it off closer to the end of the school year.
Yeah.
I think it'd be great to get everybody on the same page.
What does the rest of the board think? Do you want to try and get something before the end of the school year so we can have our numbers together for the next school year? Or?
Well, I think that's when it would be a good time to do it, is at the end of the school year, because then you'll have your ideas.
Yep.
And, you know, Mr. Chair, I mean, intervention is really important whenever you can do that. And diversion programs, we've seen how well they work as opposed to just sending a kid to court right away. I mean, if you can send them to the right place, you know, program, that kind of thing. I mean, those are, I think, excellent programs. But probably just having an overall, I don't know if it's kind of some kind of a chart or this will happen if. And Nathan did a nice presentation about at the Annandale Safe Schools about exactly what happens and, you know, from court services and their perspective. And so, you know, maybe something like that, maybe he could, you know, if you get the different agencies together with the board and we can hear, you know, this is what happens. And if he keeps on with this behavior, then this happens. So that might be a really useful tool. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at an April meeting or something that, you know, getting, just to kind of know numbers and what they're seeing and, you know, what court services is seeing, so.
And for sure, school districts, whoever, I don't know if they've got their own association, we don't need 10 school districts here, but if they got their own board or, it should be user-friendly, and we should hear from the folks that they're taking the attendance records. I mean, they're right there on the front line.
And every year they have it, before the school year, usually in August, we have, and it's court services, and county attorney, and health and human services, and all of the school administrators get together. I think our last one was held
In August?
beginning of August.
In August.
So and that's when everybody does come together and say, this is what the plan is. And I'd say this year was kind of ragged because of kind of this dual entry system, but we're, you know, I think it's a little bit early to call it yay or nay at this point. I think we're kind of after.
So can we have a recommendation for a spring or before end of school year meeting with all the?
We'll have plenty of meetings between now and then, so that we can pick it up at that point, but.
Well, I'm clear
Good.
thinking about it as long as we have conversations.
We could have an item on our May Health and Human Services Board to set a meeting to review where, you know, not to present again, but to look at where we're at or just do the numbers and suggest a meeting or something like that. If you want. Well, then you'd have a vehicle to bring it in to get a meeting set up.
Maybe April, that way you could get it together more. Warn everybody so they can schedule their vacations.
Mr. Chair,
Anything else? Yes.
this might be a good topic for the All Safe Schools meeting, you know, so everyone is there from the different agencies and the schools and things.
Yeah?
Yep, and I think this was presented at the all-school meeting.
It was out at the new building.
Okay, yeah,
Oh, that's
I
right.
had to miss that.
Right. Anything else from the board then?
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Under administration, director's comments.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of things. One is that I think in another director's comment that brought up our Wright County Family Collaborative, Family Services Collaborative. So we have ended our contract with the two contractors that were doing the work for the Family Collaborative. They've been informed. We'll be doing the work that those individuals were doing before in our fiscal area. So we're already the fiscal host and we'll be doing that work as well. So two contractors that will no longer be part of that collaborative. Again, that was with conversations with Tim Dahl regarding, if you recall, the Joint Powers Board, that agreement that we couldn't find one of, and then the lack of insurance. So covering for those items. I wanted to let you know that Health Partners provided HHS with a $35,000, I don't know if you'd call it a donation or a grant. $10,000 was to be used to improve our access to health services through HHS, and $25,000 to support and promote the community dental center. So that was a nice bit of news and kind of unsolicited, so very nice. In your packet, you should have information. I just always like to share this when it comes out, or maybe every other year, because I think a lot of questions come up. But DHS reissues the Work Will Always Pay with MFIP, and it kind of just runs you through scenarios of families that are on MFIP that you can be getting MFIP, and if you're working, it's so you don't have that cliff that they talk, that proverbial cliff that families fall off of. So it gives you scenarios in here that if you're not working, what your total grant is, but with work, you're going to increase how much ultimately you get until you get to a certain income, at which point you would no longer be eligible for the program. So just kind of a nice reminder, because I know a lot of constituents or citizens will think that people are getting like a free ride or something, and I think it's not necessarily the case. Oftentimes there is work involved with a lot of these low-income benefits and programs.
Yeah, well, just the individual alone, pretty tough to live off of that amount.
Yeah.
400 and some, I think they did increase it this past year. That was after, I don't know, 25 years they increased it. And then I also wanted to, actually I was going to have Michelle, because she could speak to it more succinctly. We have, and you've maybe heard, some issues with drug testing availability here in Wright County. Commissioner Burrell was kind of on this track a while ago, but we've made some changes, and Michelle is here to talk about what's going on right now.
So board, you may recall that we ended our contract this fall with Total Compliance Solutions, and they were the vendor that was providing drug testing locally when we had folks that were court ordered to be drug tested. And
they used to be called Rockford testing.
Correct, right. So in the interim, what we have had, it's primarily child protection families. The social workers have worked individually with those families, whether they live, work, close to a testing center. We have contracts with several that have multiple sites around our area. We've provided different, like if they've needed a gas card, we've worked with them if they have friends or family that can help transport them. So we've done a number of different things, including testing in our own building. To try and accommodate, we have an RFP that actually is due today for a drug testing provider. In the RFP, we asked if they would be willing to provide a storefront like we had with Total Compliance, or we would utilize some space on our floor. I am anticipating getting 2 from current providers that we have, 2 RFPs. We'll see if there's more. And then we'll move forward with that. In some communication with the bench, they were concerned that maybe the numerous options that we were providing to clients might not be enough. So we today started working with probation, and they will also be available to test some of our clients. And so we worked out a process, payment, all of that, all of those details, and that starts today. So they will now have, instead of 1 site in Buffalo, they now have 2 sites in Buffalo, as well as all the sites that we had previously. So our hope is that we can expedite this process and have a contract at the beginning of February with someone providing services locally. So a few details to be worked out, but that's where we're at currently.
Yes, Commissioner Dahl.
Now, the drug testing, is it blood test? Is it urine test? Is it-
Urine, saliva, hair, there's a number of different options.
So what is, McMillan's group, Court Services, what are they doing now? They're sending it out, or?
Nope, they're providing it on site at
They're
the
just
Justice
doing
Center.
your analysis.
They also are certified to do hair follicle testing.
So
And I think they
why,
can also do breathalyzer, right?
So does the court order hair? Because hair's expensive, isn't it?
That, yeah, most of our.
Infrequently.
Okay, I'm gonna say, otherwise
Very
that would be really expensive.
people, yeah.
so wouldn't we be better off having one person that was kind of dedicated to do that instead of sending it off to all these other locations if we just had? I don't know, I'm just wondering.
You mean having someone in our agency?
Well,
You have to have a male and a female, and no, I don't.
okay, I don't know how many
said no
we're
a number of
doing, what
years
it's,
ago. I do not. We used to do testing.
did we?
We used to do
it-
paternity
it's-
testing, I think, too, for child
Yeah.
support.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
No, thank you.
Okay, just curious,
Much rather contract. Is that okay?
but just trying to figure
I
out.
would say no, thank you, but
Michelle, is Trailblazer utilized at all on the folks with transport
Bus
problems?
tokens, yep, gas cards, yep.
That work pretty good?
Gosh, I would have to ask the supervisor specifically about that. But I know that we have, in the past, we have used them. So in some instances, for sure, it's working, yep. We are currently, just wanted to let you know, we're in contact with the county attorney's office who is communicating with the bench, kind of where we're at, so that they know as well.
Okay.
that's all I have for the director's comments.
I have one thing that was brought up late last week. Maybe you already know about it. It was after the agenda came out. Reference to barriers in the walk-up window areas or counters, and I didn't have a chance to get out and see it myself. But there was concern potentially that if mayhem broke out in some area over there, that it would be an easy leap over a counter for a troubled person to
So
wreak
you're talking
havoc
about the new
there.
building?
Yes.
Okay. Right, so I broached this several times. My understanding is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that initially we were not going to have barriers, and that was pre-COVID, when the building plans were started. And then we were going to have barriers in the government center, the new government center. And then the board switched, and then we were not going to have barriers in the government center. To be like the other departments. And I do know that I do have a number of staff that are very concerned about if mayhem would break out, what would happen. And right now, the design is to not have barriers. And I don't believe it's my decision, I believe it's a board decision.
And in my little bit of research that I've done, it apparently was a board decision along with department and office heads prior to 2021. And there's difference in barriers. Barriers is, you got one that prevents possibly COVID transmission, and another more permanent that prevents assaultive behavior,
Right.
which we have at a couple
Well,
buildings have those.
Right, and we, it is definitely a concern. I would also like to say, I think there are some mitigations that maybe staff aren't aware of. Like right now, if you walked up to our counter, and we do have like plexiglass there, I don't know if it would stop somebody or not, but you're standing pretty close to the other person. They walk right up to where you are. In the new building, it's more like at least this deep, so, people haven't seen that yet, so I don't know if they have the feel of what the new building is like. It's not like the person's right here and then is going to step over. They're actually back, quite a ways, and I believe two of the counters are more standing height versus, a lower height. But I thought it was off the table. If I'm wrong about that, about having barriers, then we could certainly, I'd be willing to reopen it. But
Well, the question, you're the one before us today, and this is where the concern is.
I haven't heard it.
What was your input back at the time that it came up for the board and office and department heads? What was your weigh-in on it?
The very initial ones, and it was pre-COVID, because I don't know if I would have landed at the same place then, was that I want our department to be very friendly, just like if you were going into any type of, building where you would be meeting with a service provider. So I was not in favor of having barriers at the beginning. Then COVID occurred and we were going to have barriers, and a lot of that was for the health and safety of staff, and I was all about then having barriers. And in the meantime, the board was looking at whether or not to have metal detectors and things like that. So I think the two decisions were maybe made independent of each other, like if there were metal detectors versus if they weren't metal detectors, and now I think there aren't metal detectors in the government building. So I'm certainly for safety, and I'm also for a welcoming environment, so.
But where did you weigh in when this came up prior to?
I was
being
not at a
commissioner?
board meeting where I was asked about after COVID, or during COVID.
But at
within the
some
last 2
point,
years.
at some
Mr. Chair,
point,
this was like a series of like handfuls of meetings. And, because it went from like 2018, 19, and that whenever the conceptual stage, and that was kind of made at the decision that pre-COVID that we weren't going to have barriers. And everybody was kumbaya good with that. Fast forward, when COVID came around, we had some more conversations about should we put them in, and
The cost was.
the cost associated with it, and should we do it and use ARP funds, should we not do it? And I think the move that came out of that was there was a lot of ambiguity in terms of what people were getting at that point.
And I would say my part as department head, I was getting emails. I was not being asked, what do you want, Jamie, for Health and Human Services? It's like, this is what we landed on for this group.
No, I think we do need to have something while COVID is in place. You know, some sort of a barrier, and we'll just have to go with what we currently have, and like down at DMV. You know, really as a temporary, but I do know that we did look at it as a permanent solution, and the cost because of the redesign fees and all that was just stupid.
Yeah, it was
Right,
like,
when I was asking questions, it's like, this decision has been made, so.
So no,
I don't know.
we do need to have
Yep.
the temporary barriers up, you know, however they do it, but once we get her,
Yeah, and I think and I agree, I think especially during COVID,
Yep.
I do feel like with having a more expansive area, potentially we have a little bit more safety too.
Yep.
but no, I think during COVID, we're gonna have to come up with something.
and
Unless Sarah can guarantee us that this is over with.
put a
We
giant
have
mask
100%
on there.
vaccination and 100% compliance.
But COVID barriers and safety for, you know, mayhem is totally different. So is there ARP money available for a more permanent barrier? And it'd be expensive, because I talked to Alan. We don't have any money available for that, Commissioner Batcher?
I mean, there's funds, I mean, it doesn't matter, would you want to divert those ARP funds for that, and to what, to how much, you know?
But I wish I'd had a chance to take a field trip out there, and maybe it'd be beneficial if we would. Because I'd have a perspective. It sounds like you kind of greet and meet people in one more secure area, and then if everything goes okay, you let them into a less secure?
Well, no, not exactly. So our front desk is going to be, at this point, because I heard no, yes, no. So at this point, our front desk is open, like there would be no barrier between the front desk staff. And we serve the same clients as the sheriff and the court services, and we basically good people, but you know, you can't predict anybody's behavior. To date, we've been successful in not having any overtly aggressive or able to get a response quick enough. And then what would happen is, like, if you were going to see one of our staff, we're going to keep it the way it is now. Before COVID, we would bring clients into our secure area. And that's what, to me, was the biggest safety factor we had, that we were missing before COVID. We brought clients into our secure area, and that's where we met them alone in meeting rooms or whatever. In the new building, we'll have a set of 10 interview rooms that are still secure, so it does not open into our general workplace. And staff will bring the client from the lobby into this, through a secure door, into another secure area to meet with them in a interview room. Those interview rooms will be equipped with panic buttons.
Panic buttons.
Things like that. I mean, I think there's certainly been a nod towards security. We have cameras. We currently have cameras in our lobbies. We have, you know, those kinds of things. But I think, personally, for me, not to have people being brought into our secured space gives us the most safety out of any option. If the board wants to consider more security at the front desk level, you know, that would be, I think, what you're asking. But we welcome you to see where we're at now, but we haven't even seen where we're going to be, really, you know, other than just touring it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Witter.
I would suggest that you, if you're gonna have a panic button, to use them once in a while, just to test them out. I know when my daughter was a clerk for a judge in another county, one day he pressed the panic button to see what would happen. They waited, and they waited, and they waited. And one gal came in just with paperwork, and he says, "You are now a hostage because we just pushed the panic button and nobody's here yet."
We conduct tests even now with our panic buttons, and the manager actually asks us with that.
Good, because it's actually happened where nobody has shown up.
You know, and honestly.
And this is a judge on top of it, you know, when all this stuff was going on with judges getting shot and
Right.
stuff.
Well,
but-
you know, between child support and child protection, I think we certainly, you know, can make a target of ourselves. My other that I think is a good thing is that we've been sitting kind of out there at the HSC without any bailiffs or anybody present, and, you know, we rely on Buffalo PD to come if we have issues, and I've called them, you know, we call them, not regularly, but enough. I feel much safer being in a large campus and having, you know, help clearly much closer and more available to us.
So will you have that panic button by that front counter then too?
Yes, we currently have one and we will have one.
Okay.
Just one, or it'll be a couple of them?
Right now, I believe it's just one at the front desk.
And I think there's one in that room that's off of the front desk.
Correct.
Well, Alan says it's a critical time and even beyond for cost and estimate and the whole thing.
We would welcome having a discussion about it or
But
again
I'm
touring
just
it.
saying what Alan said, is the parts are already on order and to be delivered, to make it without anything and to add,
Yeah, and that's,
Redo the
what-
framework and the
and
whole
that's
thing.
why we can do something temporarily.
oh, just the thing to prevent COVID transmission suspended from.
Yeah, and I
change
think
type
that
thing.
we're gonna have to do.
I just think for the public, I don't want like barbed wire and fencing, you know. We want it to look like, you know, we welcome you, but obviously our staff safety is paramount.
Yeah, no, with COVID right
I thought
now.
you were gonna have some big ugly dogs there sitting.
Well, we could
Well,
ask
don't bring
Alan
that
to
up.
get
My
a
staff would
cost
love to
and
bring
talk
dogs to
about
the
ELP.
office.
Is that totally no interest in that, or of more of a secure permanent barrier?
Mr. Chair, I think that when the committee looked at that, and the cost just was kind
It
of
was
prohibitive.
it was after the fact.
It was after the fact, so,
And the
yeah,
original was that nobody was gonna
right.
Problems, yeah.
Plan.
have secured.
I think when you look at the building holistically and the amount of law enforcement that's on the campus and the size of that counter to get across it and it's in your own right, I mean,
Yeah.
we're not gonna put bulletproof glass up. I mean, so from that standpoint, you're really looking about somebody physically jumping over that counter then to harm you. Because, so from that perspective, I mean, to spend tens of thousands of dollars for that that rarity that could potentially happen in the panic button, the size of the counter, the amount of law enforcement, and the escape routes that are available to these individuals, taking all that into consideration, I think there is enough safety features in place. But, I mean, I understand everybody has a different
I would have staff
comfort
that
from
disagree.
safety.
I think we all have different levels of where we feel, you know. But I know the county attorney and court services have more security.
Well, I guess it's not gonna cost any more 5 years from now than it is now potentially, so if we need to in the future,
Might go down.
we're not gonna save any potentially or cost us.
Prices are probably gonna come down.
All right, well, I just thought I'd bring it as far as we could here. You're gonna get the COVID barriers per se, and I guess.
I didn't even know that, so
No,
that's good.
we need to provide the COVID here.
Oh, yeah, I would think.
All right, anything else? All right, we are adjourned at 2:56.